On this Friday night, Britain's rapid power shift.
The work of change begins immediately.
Keir Starmer officially takes the reins as the UK's 58th Prime Minister.
That we will rebuild Britain.
What this could mean for trade talks with Canada. A settlement for hundreds sexually abused by Newfoundland and Labrador's Catholic clerics. How the church doesn't have the cash. Crushed spirits, the strike that's closed Ontario's government-run liquor stores. What workers want. And the art of honoring the Calgary Stampede and a First Nation.
I have a lot of memories.
A young illustrator's personal and award-winning tribute.
Global National, reporting tonight. Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Britain has a new prime minister thanks to a general election that has dramatically reshaped the nation's electoral map, with nearly half the seats in parliament changing hands. After 14 years in government, the incumbent Conservative Party led by Rishi Sunak saw a near wipeout last night. Almost two-thirds of their seats are gone. Most were snatched up by Keir Starmer's centre-left Labour Party. The new prime minister taking on a commanding mandate with more than 400 seats in parliament. And it didn't take long for him to get to work.
Sir Keir Starmer, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty. You must be utterly exhausted.
Starmer meeting King Charles at Buckingham Palace today as he was formally asked to form Britain's new government. It was a landslide victory for Labour and the Tories' worst defeat in the party's nearly 200-year history. But as the new Prime Minister takes office, the challenges ahead are monumental. Crystal Goomansingh has tonight's top story.
A swift transition of power like ripping off a Band-Aid.
To the country, I would like to say first and foremost, I am sorry. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss.
Within hours of votes being cast and counted, Rishi Sunak announced his departure as party leader and left the Prime Minister's residence, clearing the path for the new guy. Propelled into power with a seismic mandate, Keir Starmer becomes just the 7th Labour Prime Minister in British history.
Whether you voted Labour or not, in fact, especially if you did not, I say to you directly, my government will serve you.
A flurry of activity on the other side of the gate in front of 10 Downing Street, but a lot of action on this side as well. People lined up, taking photos. We often see that. What we don't see, potential cabinet ministers walking down the road, heading in to meet with the new Prime Minister.
Rachel Reeves is the new Chancellor, the first woman to hold the chief financial role. David Lammy is the new Foreign Secretary. Just a few names Canadians will come to know.
I think the relationship will be excellent.
Canadian High Commissioner to the UK, Ralph Goodale, says there are many joint initiatives to be addressed, including restarting bilateral trade talks.
Our trade negotiators are skillful people, and they'll move the file along in a very positive way.
Foreign and domestically, there is a lot of work ahead for Labour. While there'll be fewer Tory critics, there'll be more Liberal Democrats, Greens, and Reform UK members.
You're very angry.
Including the self-professed establishment disruptor, Nigel Farage. Labour has crossed the threshold of power, but now it must govern. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
With the British vote now over, America's election campaigning is only heating up. U.S. President Joe Biden hit the campaign trail today in the face of increased scrutiny around his well-being. His message was loud and clear. I'm running and gonna win again. But in an interview with ABC News tonight, the 81-year-old was not so clear about last week's disastrous debate performance.
Did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted.
Calls for Biden to drop out are not letting up. As Jackson Proskow reports, today's rally in the battleground state of Wisconsin marks the start of a weekend that could make or break Biden's future.
Can you still beat Trump?
The questions simply will not go away.
as President Joe Biden sets out to reassure voters he's still up to the job.
Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race.
8 days after his political implosion on the debate stage, Biden is drowning in a sea of bad headlines and leaked details about his alleged decline. The New York Times reports Biden told a meeting of Democratic governors that he needs to get more sleep and work fewer hours, including curtailing events after 8 p.m. Axios quotes unnamed aides who describe a protective bubble around the president, saying Biden relies on staff to nudge him with reminders of who he's meeting.
Those concerns about his health will not go to rest. They will be with us if he stays in the campaign every day of the campaign.
Got me, man. I'm not going anywhere.
Though he continues to insist he's not dropping out, behind the scenes, the tide is turning. At a campaign event in Wisconsin, a Democratic senator in a tough re-election fight of her own refused to appear with the president.
Happy 4th of July, everyone!
While speculation is swirling about Vice President Kamala Harris stepping in. She's been at Biden's side more frequently in recent days.
For Kamala Harris, it's almost as though she has to reintroduce herself, at the same time being loyal to the guy that people want to step aside and push her into the job.
All the while, Republican candidate Donald Trump is staying silent and out of view, content to let Democrats face a crisis that could define November's election. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, nearly 300 victims who suffered abuse by Catholic clergy finally know how much the Archdiocese will have to compensate them. A bankruptcy proceeding has determined the church must pay out more than $100 million for sexual and physical abuse cases dating back decades. But as Heidi Petrachik explains, it's money the now bankrupt Archdiocese doesn't have.
The Mount Cashel Orphanage for Boys in St. John's was demolished in 1992, and the fight to compensate those abused there was just beginning.
It triggers for them some of the worst experience of their lives.
Now, survivors know just how much they'll receive. An insolvency process has determined the bankrupt Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation of St. John's should pay out $104 million for 292 claims. Some of those claims from survivors who have since died, many abused at Mount Cashel.
But others were altar boys or parishioners or were students in Catholic schools. And as well, of course, I say men, there were some women who were survivors of abuse at the hands of priests or in their school system.
Legal claims against the church for the abuse date back 25 years, all eventually forcing the Episcopal Corporation to file for bankruptcy in 2021 and start selling off assets, including churches. But it's still short, raising only about $43 million so far. In a statement to Global News, the Archbishop of St. John's says the church, quote, will continue to liquidate property for the benefit of the claimants. Any amount outstanding could come from elsewhere.
So the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is another potential defendant, as are other religious entities.
It's damaged the standing of the Catholic Church in the world.
One theologian says the church now has processes to prevent and swiftly deal with any abuse, but is concerned about lingering attitudes at the very top with Pope Francis.
He is in a couple of very high-profile cases. He is fixated on a notion of due process, which seems to be like a return to the bad old days.
After so many years, there's hope this lingering and dark chapter in Newfoundland and Labrador may soon close. Compensation payments could start this fall. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Halifax.
Canada's economy lost some 1,400 jobs last month, while the unemployment rate climbed to its highest level in more than 2 years. Statistics Canada says unemployment hit 6.4% in June, up just slightly from 6.2% in May. Nationally, fewer people were working in transportation, warehousing, and public administration in June, while more people took up jobs in accommodation and food services. It remains unclear what this could mean for any possible interest rate cuts. The Bank of Canada's next rate announcement is set for July 24th. It is going to be a lot harder to buy alcohol in Ontario over the next couple of weeks. Thousands of workers with the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, or LCBO, went on strike today. The issue at the centre of the job action? Premier Doug Ford's ambitious plans to make alcohol more accessible throughout Ontario. A goal striking employees say could put their jobs under threat. Mackenzie Gray explains.
It's a sinking feeling Ontarians haven't had in nearly 100 years. Who's got the power? LCBO workers on strike for the first time in its history.
70% of our workers are precarious, they're casual. We want more permanent jobs for Ontario.
The union also pushing for higher wages to cope with the cost of living, but the key sticking point, the Ontario government's plan to allow more than 8,000 corner stores, gas stations, and additional grocery stores to sell beer, wine, and coolers as of this September.
The expansion in the way that Premier Ford wants it to unroll, then we would lose thousands of jobs.
Increased access to alcohol, a key part of Ontario's teetotaling premier's political brand, making it unlikely he'll back down on the privatization pledge.
There's absolutely no reason that people in Ontario shouldn't enjoy the same convenient shopping experience as other Canadians do.
Shut it down! That means the 9,000 LCBO employees that are on strike are likely to stay there, sending Ontarians to the beer store or the 450 grocery stores currently selling wine and beer.
And Ontario is kind of the last place to make that change.
We always fear competition, but at the end of the day, it often works in everybody's favor.
But if the new competitors can beat the Crown Corporation on selection and price is still up for debate. Despite physical stores still being closed, you can buy from the LCBO's website and have orders delivered for free. And it will still be the only place in Ontario that will sell hard liquor, even with the Premier's new plan.
The LCBO is a really big buyer. It's the second biggest buyer of alcohol in the world, and they're able to leverage that.
The impact of the strike being felt a little less here in Ottawa, with the time-honored tradition of crossing the river and going over to Quebec to get drinks still alive and well, and the beer that you get in Gatineau and bring back to Ottawa is just a little bit cheaper anyways. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Ottawa.
Reunited at long last. Coming up, how friends helped a Quebec man's family escape Gaza and come to Canada. Ceasefire talks over the war in Gaza appear to be back on after weeks of stalled negotiations. A delegation sent by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just returned from gatherings with mediators in Qatar. Netanyahu's office says there are still gaps between the sides, but they will return to continue talks next week as public pressure to rescue the remaining Israeli hostages intensifies.
There is a deal here on the table. We ask you, all of you, all the people that are involved in it, please make it happen. Please bring our children back home.
There are also reports of a key revision by Hamas. According to Reuters news agency, a Palestinian official says Hamas is no longer demanding Israel commit to a permanent ceasefire as a precondition to any agreement. Hamas will reportedly instead negotiate for that during the first phase of the proposed deal outlined by the U.S., which will see fighting stopped for several weeks. The Canadian government has created a special program to help bring Palestinians affected by the crisis in Gaza to Canada. But as we've reported on Global National, those trying to bring stranded loved ones to Canada say the federal program is far too cumbersome, bureaucratic, and slow. Franca Minyaka reports on one Quebec City couple who took it upon themselves to reunite a Palestinian professor working here in Canada with his family.
Zachariah Hellis has waited 10 months to share moments like this with his wife and children. Originally in Quebec City for a guest teaching job at Université Laval, Hellis found himself completely alone with no contact with his family when disaster struck last October.
I tried to contact my wife several times. There was, no electricity, no telecommunication companies. After a while, I could make an interconnection with her, checking that she is alive and the family are alive.
Their home in Gaza was destroyed along with all of their belongings. His family would move from place to place on foot in the following months, eventually sheltering in Rafah. But Hellis knew their time there was running out, with the Israeli military set to launch a full-scale ground invasion of the area, closing off the border. Hellis was desperate to get his family out.
Your family, your little kids are trapped in the middle of that combat. How are we going to get them alive?
We were lucky that we did that when we did that because the border was closed shortly thereafter.
Nora Loretto and her partner have been friends with Hellis since his arrival in Quebec City and felt a personal duty to help him. Hellis doesn't qualify for aid from the Canadian government, and Loretto also felt the official channels weren't working. According to Immigration Canada, 359 people who left Gaza have been approved to come to Canada through the government's program. Like many, Loretto turned instead to a private Egyptian company that charges about $5,000 US per person to get them on an official evacuee list. Loretto and her partner spent just under $40,000 to get Hellis's family out.
To see the death toll, to see the tens of thousands of children who've been killed, I think most people are going to say, well, what can I do?
The family was finally reunited at Jean Lesage Airport on June 24th.
To hug them and embrace them between my arms, making sure that they are alive. They are with me in Quebec. That was an incredible moment.
Hellis says he and his family feel embraced by the community and are ready to call the city home. Franca Mignacca, Global News, Quebec City.
Heat hovers over Western Canada. Ahead, how high temperatures could soar. The second round of presidential elections got underway in Iran today. Voter turnout was at an historic low in the first round. It's unclear if things will improve for the runoff. Iranians are choosing between a heart surgeon who presents himself as a reformer but whose powers will be constrained by Iran's supreme leader, and a hardline nuclear negotiator vowing to uphold Iran's strict religious and moral codes. The resort city of Cancun looked a lot different than paradise today as Hurricane Beryl barreled into the popular sun destination. Heavy winds and rain lashing the city and the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula as Beryl made landfall there as a Category 2 storm. It did some damage, but it was a far cry from the situation in other parts of the Caribbean that were in the storm's path. Beryl is now heading over the Gulf of Mexico toward Texas, where it's expected to make landfall on Monday. After a wet June, many Canadians on the West Coast are happy that summer is finally here. But forecasters are warning of the dangers, with temperatures potentially breaking the 40-degree barrier in some parts of BC by Monday. It's all because of an upper-level ridge of high pressure that has parked itself over much of western North America. The heat will be of particular concern in Northern California, where firefighters are trying to contain a major fire about 100 kilometers north of Sacramento. In neighboring Nevada, Las Vegas is set to push close to 50 degrees on Monday, possibly breaking yet another all-time high. Friendship forged. Next, how this year's Calgary Stampede poster brought an artist and a Stoney Nakoda teepee holder together.
Your Calgary Stampede Parade Marshal, Owen Crochue.
A man who's been part of the Stampede in some way for more than 30 years, this year honored as Parade Marshal. Owen Crochue is an actor from the Piikani Nation and blood tribe of the Blackfoot Confederacy. He'll also be emceeing this year's Calgary Stampede Powwow, a competition that highlights the diversity of First Nations dancing, singing, and drumming. It might not be the first thing you think about when you think of the Calgary Stampede, but art is as much a part of the show as 10-gallon hats and bucking broncos. This year, the winner of the 2024 Calgary Stampede Youth Poster Competition is Lloyd Templeton. He grew up watching the parade on the sidelines, but as Dallas Flexhog explains, this year he's part of the show.
At 23 years old, Lloyd Templeton is just getting into his career as an artist. Carefully illustrating with ink is his comfort zone, but he knew he wanted to push himself, trying for a third time to become part of the over 100-year history of Stampede posters. Entering the competition for the 2024 edition by channeling his own memories of watching the parade downtown.
As a kid, that was my favorite part of Stampede. I have a lot of memories, horses in city streets. It's quite striking. So as a kid, I was just like enamored with that.
Flipping through hundreds of photos of past Stampede parades, he came across this picture of Stoney Nakoda teepee holder Dwayne Mark.
First of all, what he was wearing, his regalia, was just so visually striking and impressive. But in his expression, you know, I could tell he had the same love and excitement about being in the parade that I felt watching the parade.
Templeton's final impressive oil painting got the seal of approval from Mark. The two became fast friends in the process, even taking horseback riding lessons together before saddling up side by side in this year's Stampede Parade.
For me, after spending so many hours painting people on horseback, getting to be on horseback myself in the parade is like the pinnacle. It's such an exciting moment.
Templeton also designed the official boots of the 2024 Stampede. Keeping the focus on the Stoney Nakoda, he got input from Mark and his niece, First Nations Princess Margaret Holloway.
And on the inside, I got Dwayne to offer a Stoney Nakoda phrase, a special Stoney Nakoda phrase that translates roughly to fostering peace and respect. So there's kind of a special positive message for everyone wearing the pair of boots.
More of Templeton's art can be found throughout the 10 days of Stampede at the Art Gallery. And if you look down outside the new BMO Centre, his creation is right there in the concrete. Templeton is already putting the $10,000 scholarship he won through the poster competition to use. He's off to Florence, Italy in the fall to train in Renaissance oil painting. A fitting next step for a 23-year-old now sealed in Calgary Stampede history. Dallas Flexhog, Global News.
And as we mentioned earlier, the Stampede kicked off this morning with a parade through downtown Calgary. Thousands of people lined the streets to celebrate the start of the greatest outdoor show on Earth. The 112th edition of the parade featured 100 entries, including 11 bands and 700 horses. That is Global National for this Friday. Thanks so much for watching and have a great night.